He has political experience. You know, he's worked in the offices of Jerry Brown as press secretary. He was communications director for Senator Dianne Feinstein. So he has, knowledge of the belly of the beast. But his writings now on the world of Silicon Valley, because again, Gil Duran knows so much about this world of these tech billionaires and their plans. It gives him this other perspective, which seems so relevant to what's going on today. The nerd Reich is something that he writes often on, and he's quite prolific. It talks about the tech authoritarian political plan, and then Frame Lab is I think it's a Substack. I'll ask Gil. It's on political language and political framing, and I support him there as well. How about it for the great Gil Duran, everybody? What's up, Gil?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, the Nerd Reich is super relevant right now because we have this group of people who are based in the tech world, have built their profiles that way, but seem to have moved into, in an aggressive way, control of politics. I wonder if you can speak to that movement and then their strategies moving forward.
Sure. About 2 years ago, I became very interested in some of the discussions going on in the tech world about politics in the future. And I discovered through reading lots of books, listening to their podcasts, listening to their conference appearances and speeches, that there was this interesting ideology forming, which goes as the following. That nation states are going to collapse, that they're not going to survive the 21st century because the information age has changed everything. And that in the absence of collapsing nation states, there's going to be a new form of governance. And it's going to look like smaller territories that are ruled by basically tech billionaires and tech corporations. Some call this the network state, others call it patchworks. Some don't refer to it by name, but the general idea is that democracies and traditional governments like the United States and the countries of Europe are no longer relevant, they're obsolete, and that Silicon Valley has a responsibility to create a new form of governance that basically replaces democracy with tech dictatorship. I wrote a series about this last year for the New Republic. Some of my stories went viral, but for the most part, the mainstream media sort of stayed away from that narrative. But what we're seeing now in Elon Musk, in the Dodge program, I don't call it Doge, I call it Dodge because they're dodging democracy. We see them doing all of the things I talked about in my stories. Not only that, but it's the same group of people doing it. So my job has been to kind of tell people that this is not chaos, it's a strategy when they've been laying out, really, if you look back for the last 30 years.
These are the guys who are the Curtis Yarvin disciples, sort of they're monarchists, really, but they, as these technocrats, they feel that a CEO can best handle things, that, these politicians don't know what they're doing. You need a CEO to run America like a business.
Yeah, but when they say CEO, they pretty much mean dictator. Someone who doesn't have to answer to people, someone who doesn't have to answer to a legislature. Now, that's not the way most capitalism works, but it's certainly the way Elon Musk's companies work, right? He gets to be the dictator, do whatever he wants. He can tank Tesla's stock. No one seems to be moving to fire him. So it's this different idea of what a business is and what a government is. And it's more aligned with what we would consider a dictatorship or a fascist or authoritarian system. And they've been very overt about this. Curtis Yarvin, who you mentioned, is very close to Peter Thiel, who finds him very inspirational. And he's been writing since like the early 2000s about the need to replace democracy with dictatorship and create something he calls patchworks instead, to bring back monarchy, the idea that democracy is dead and not worth saving. But even before then, in 1997, there was a book called The Sovereign Individual that came out, and it predicted that the rise of something called cyber currency would undermine government power and lead to the disintegration of traditional nations. And it was so influential on a guy named Peter Thiel that when the book was reissued in 2020, he wrote the preface for it. So I would encourage people to look up The Sovereign Individual and what it says, because my point has been that there's an ideological project coming out of Silicon Valley that is very dangerous and very anti-democratic. And it's important to see that for what it is. They aren't quiet about it. My journalism isn't based on secret documents or leaked files. This is the stuff they have been putting out into the public sphere for about almost 30 years now. And they've become more intense about it in recent years. And what we saw now with crypto coming in as this massive force in the election, with Elon Musk, a tech CEO, putting himself at the head of our government, is everything they have been talking about. And it's not clear to me why mainstream publications like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post won't say that.
I love that you mentioned this currency because I was going to get to it anyway, and that you've referenced crypto because I've always associated crypto, uh, with a way to move a lot of money without it really being tracked, But
Mhm.
also, if you look at it, excuse me, just had to clear my throat. If you look at it on a national level, they're talking about this reserve of crypto. It makes no sense to me,
Mhm.
but it makes no sense from financially. It also, it seems to me, I associate crypto as well. And maybe you can correct me on this with, in a way, working against these sovereign currencies. I mean, if you're about strengthening the dollar and the dollar's strength internationally, you don't want to take a big holding in crypto. You don't want to do anything to support crypto. You want to regulate crypto, which is kind of what it was happening before Trump rolled along. So the introduction of a crypto reserve by the US government to me works against all of those things that I thought underpinned the economic system.
Definitely. Well, to be clear, they want to undermine that economic system. That's very much a clear and stated goal. If you go and listen to what they're saying in their podcasts, what they're writing in their books, what they're saying in these network state conferences that they're holding, it's very much about that. Crypto's design is anti government. And the idea from the Sovereign Individual book from 1997 was that these cyber currencies would allow for people to not pay taxes and therefore starve existing governments of necessary revenue, and that this would hasten the collapse of traditional nations. They certainly want to see the dollar replaced with something like Bitcoin instead, which would make them all, by the way, fabulously even more wealthy than they already are. Right. But this is not just about money. Remember, these guys have millions and millions or billions and billions of dollars. They've already got the money. Now they want something else. They want power. And I would encourage people to pay attention to that. Crypto is very much about undermining the monetary system. And they want to undermine the monetary system because they want to undermine our democratic structures and our form of government. And again, this isn't me saying this. They're very clear on it. They're saying it out loud.
Is there a sense that they're all incompetents, but we who have built these fortunes and have created essentially the best of society, we know what's best for the world? Does it come from that place?
It's very much an ideology of tech supremacy. They have the idea that since they are so wealthy and are at the head of these technologies, that they have figured out all of history and the future. And the future will be according to what they say it should be. And they view the rise of AI as really cementing this deal, that they will be able to govern everything with AI. They won't need people as much. And you can trace this, well, there's a lot of places you can trace it to. But in the 1997 book, The Sovereign Individual, that Peter Thiel found so influential. It says that basically, once the nation states start collapsing and there's no more traditional jobs because of technology, that the world will witness the rise of a so called cognitive elite who will then be in a position to rule the world because they've learned how to make money off of the new information age and the internet. And that's very much what we've seen. We've seen these people become billionaires or the richest people in the world, largely off of technology and ideas. And wealth now scales much faster than it did in the 20th century. You have people who are just exponentially richer than they used to be. And with that wealth has come a sort of messianic mindset that they must also take over the world. And I think it's important for people to understand that's what's going on. This is not the usual, oh, they want lower taxes and they want less regulation. They want to be in charge. And this last year, I think people looked at it as sort of conspiratorial. And if Kamala Harris had won, I would look like a guy who had gone down a deep rabbit hole looking at a handful of extreme people with weird ideas. But when you turn on the news today, this is what you see happening. And my role is just to make it clear to people, especially to journalists who are doing a very bad job of telling people the story, that there's a very long track record here of these people talking about doing exactly what they are now doing.
I mentioned that you have a background, you're the opinion editor, I believe, at the Sacramento Bee, but you also did work with Dianne Feinstein's office back in the day, and Newsom as well. I mean, the reason I mention that is I see that as an asset as you evaluate the playing field and the landscape right now, because you have worked in that world that is of more conventional government and politics. How then uh, do you message against this? I mean, it seems as it's kind of like an evil James Bond villain kind of a plan that they have. It would seem to be easy to message against, but because of their money and because of the way we view money as commensurate with success, maybe it makes it harder to message against it.
Well, I think one of the oldest stories in human history is a small group of elites wanting to tyrannize the rest of the population. We see that all through history. History is largely a series of revolutions where the majority of people rebel against the tyranny of the few. And we are very much in that situation now in 2025. I mean, these guys have read science fiction and they sympathize with the villains. They're trying to engineer how we get to all of this dystopias from science fiction. And every time I write about this, people point out all the different science fiction books where these similar plot lines occur. Well, science fiction gets its ideas from history, feudalism, tyranny, corrupt evil monarchies, you name it. And so that's very much an old story. And if the Democratic Party can't find a way to tell a story about how the few are trying to oppress the many using technology and as a weapon, then I'm not really sure what we're all doing here.
Yeah, it's funny too, the sci-fi part of it. I was just arguing with somebody yesterday or discussing it, but it just it as the more the conversation went on, it seemed like maybe it was an argument, and it was related to Musk's uh, invocation of the he invokes Mars and the kind of like we're going to
Mhm.
go to Mars. Then you hear Trump say we're going to go to Mars, and that is a to me it's a sci-fi kind of default. Like we're going to go to Mars because Mars was what you heard about first the moon, then Mars, and then the rest of the universe type thing. When the reality is Mars is even going there is a ridiculous enterprise, and somehow colonizing it is an even more absurd notion. So anyone who knows anything about science can see the absurdity in it. I do see it as a way to pour a bunch of money to Elon Musk, his companies, and clearly there's a shimmer, I guess is what I'm saying, to associated with saying this. We're going to go to Mars. So uh, this Mars thing and stuff like it, I feel captures the imagination of the public, and again, it kind of takes the stink off of people like Musk.
Well, if we wanted to cut government waste and be more efficient, we would stop toying around with the stupid idea of going to Mars.
Thank
There's
you.
no reason why there's any reason to do that. Who voted for that? Right? We have a lot of problems here that we could take care of, filling potholes or building more infrastructure because our infrastructure is failing. I think an important element of this is we're going to witness a massive heist of in the form of privatization, trying to push government duties toward companies owned by these folks. And we're already seeing that the crypto reserve is largely about making sure these guys make tons of money off of crypto, right? Everything, somebody put a big bet on crypto. Trump says crypto reserve, it goes way up, it goes down again. This is a massive pump and dump scheme and a really an eviscerating of the public good to put that wealth and power in private hands. And it's happening very openly. I mean, this term started with Trump making millions and millions of dollars in a meme coin rug pull, a pump and dump scheme. And if Kamala Harris had done something like that, well, she would have been driven out of office already by the newspapers. Instead, we all forgot about it within a few days and moved right along. So, Trump has been able to create this disinformation distortion reality field, and I think it's a big problem. But we have to keep our eye on the ball here. This is about stealing the public good and putting it under private control.
It's extraordinary. By the way, Kim corrects me that you worked for Jerry Brown's office, not for Gavin Newsom's office. So I apologize for that. You're very gracious in not pointing out my error. But I guess I liked that, and again, it doesn't take away from the fact that you are understanding of conventional politics, and that makes you, I think, somewhat unique. It gives you something of a perspective when you have this deep knowledge of these tech titans, and you also have the world of conventional politics. And so, to my question, conventional politics seems ill-equipped right now to do anything. I've never seen. I understand the party being cowed by Trump, but I mean, they're really permitting the dismantling of the entire federal government. And it's not being done in any kind of considered fashion. It is an utter wanton destruction. And I don't see anything in the way of conventional politics pushing back on it.
No, the most we have is Bernie Sanders going around the country holding town halls and listening to angry people. The establishment Democrats seem to be hiding under a rock for the most part. We're not hearing anything from them. No one is coming out to tell people that it's going to be okay or that we have a plan to win and take our country back. The Democrats seem to think that if they just stand by and hide out, that people will rationally come to the decision that this is all bad and that they should be thrown out in 2026. But they're not factoring in the power of disinformation and narrative control. Believe me, these guys will find a way to say that everything that happened is the fault of Democrats, and a large number of people will believe them because that's the only narrative that they're hearing. We live in an age of narrative warfare, and the first rule of narrative warfare is that it's constant. And so it's shocking to me to see the Democratic Party fall so far. But there's a lot of Democrats who want tech money, who want crypto money, and there's a lot of consultants who in the off election years are working for some of these same guys. So maybe there's a good reason why there's not as much resistance as we would expect to see at a time like this. This is the biggest opportunity the Democratic Party has to make a leap toward progress by showing people what the Republican Party has actually become. And instead, they are complicit in the shadows, hiding out, apparently too scared, too timid, or too lost to say anything about it. And it's really shocking. Where's Kamala Harris? Where's Barack Obama? Where's Joe Biden? Where are all the heroes of the Democratic Party when at the hour when it matters most, right? It's never going to matter again like it matters right now. And so it's really shocking to see. But I'm just convinced that some other thing will rise in its place. Some other leaders will emerge. And that's what we're going to need. The media has also failed. The media is just not prepared for the level of narrative warfare taking place. The tech bros see the traditional media is largely disappearing in the next decade or two. And I can't say that I disagree with that, because if this is the way things are going to work, they're basically writing their own obituary, both sidesing fascism and democracy, and kind of unable to really tell people incisively what it is that's happening. That's very obvious. As you said, I come from traditional politics. I come from traditional media. And, it's just mind-boggling to me that the advanced conversation that these tech bros have been having is not something that people are being told about. And if there's some memo as to why we're not supposed to discuss it, I wish somebody would share it with me. I'm a rational guy. Maybe I'll be quiet too, but just tell me,
The capitulation of the media to like the pre-surrendering now, like the don't hurt me, I won't say anything or do anything that calls you out. That's in full swing. I mean, you've seen ABC tap out. CBS finally, after the shakedown, has now been, the Trump lawsuit has now been raised to $20 billion. They kind of have no choice but to push back, or at least, go all the way to some kind of legal judgment, or at least threaten that. But everybody else is kind of running scared. And honestly, Gil, I get it. I mean, I get why they're fearful, because these guys think nothing of going after these institutions and people personally who don't play along.
Well, definitely. But, I'm just one guy who has a small newsletter, but I believe in my country, right? I don't see why people who have millions and millions of dollars in revenue and teams of lawyers and teams of reporters aren't doing something about it. I guess in the end, the protecting and defending the supposed greatest nation that ever existed wasn't that important to people. They'd rather keep collecting their six-figure paychecks and feel safe at home, drinking their organic coffees and teas instead of like doing something about it. So, I'm sure that this is going to get really scary at some point. I've thought about that, but someone has to do it. And my hope is that other people will become brave by seeing others model the behavior of what needs to happen. That's all I can really say. I didn't set out to write about this. I kind of fell into this story because I thought there was some really weird stuff that these guys were saying. And I fortunately gave myself a year to do the reading and to immerse myself in their world. I may be writing a book on the subject, which is a new development. But I would just encourage people to dig a little deeper. Look up the sovereign individual, look up the network state, and learn for yourself.
Yeah, the sovereign individual, clearly you've referenced it several times. I really want to get on that myself. And the nerdreich.com is the website. So I'm on your Substack also, which is FrameLab, which I really like. You're still active there, right? I think I just saw something that you wrote a couple days ago.
Yeah. We moved off of Substack to the Ghost platform, which is nonprofit. I think a lot of people don't know Substack is one of the major investors is Mark Andreessen, who is one of the guys behind this stuff. And so it's amazing to me that so many liberal writers are paying 10% of the revenue to the same guys who they're screaming against on their Substack. So, but Substack has become shorthand for newsletter, but I'm on the Ghost platform. And on the Nerd Reich last week, I wrote a summary of the sovereign individual, the main points from it, so people don't have to read it. But I encourage anybody to go find the original sources, read them, and see if you see something different than I see. You know, maybe it's all a coincidence that all the stuff they've been talking about seems to be the stuff that they're doing, and I'm open to that. But I think we should at least tell people that coincidentally they've been saying very similar things for a long time. You know, like I'm a rational guy, so if you find something that I've gotten wrong, anybody, please tell me. I'm open to criticism.
We have the Nerd Reich in our chat. There's a hot link to it, and we'll also put a link to it underneath this video. Gil, I've got mad respect for you. So glad I could spend a couple of minutes talking to you, and I can't wait to get into some of the writings that you've referred to in this conversation, and I hope you'll come back. Really enjoyed it.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right. Gil Duran, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.